It's my great pleasure to introduce Lisa Roper from Chanticleer. Um, Chanticleer is probably in my top 5 gardens in the world, including Sissinghurst, Villandry, and I probably on most days would tell you that Chanticleer is my favorite garden in the United States. I first became acquainted with it in the early 2000s, and got to meet Lisa about 6 years ago now, at an American Public Gardens Association meeting that was being held at Disneyland. Um, it was actually Lisa's colleague Eric Sue who came and spoke at Western Hort a few years ago. Was my first time coming to a Western Hort meeting in nearly 30 years, and it stuck. So Chanticleer I hold is a very special place, with a very special team of horticulturists. Lisa has been at Chanticleer for 36 years. She was there before it opened up to the public, and has been maintaining the rock garden the last 11 years, and also maintains the ruin garden up on the top of the hill, which is a lot of people's favorite part of Chanticleer. She's very active in the North American Rock Garden Association. You're on the board. And is active locally in her region of the United States, in the Philadelphia, Eastern U.S. Part of the country. Um, Lisa is here to talk about her work with the gravel garden at Chanticleer, and tell us about some of the amazing things that she does.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's so great to be here, and I think I need the advancer, right? I need the advancer. Can you all hear me? Oh, great. And is it possible to dim the lights? Wonderful. So I'm going to talk about the gravel garden tonight, but before I get into that, I would like to just give you a quick whirl through Chanticleer, because how many of you been there? Great. That's a good amount, but I think it might be nice just to, just get a lay of the land first. So this was the home of the Rosengarten family, uh, and it's not advancing. How many times have I advanced you? Okay. This was the home of the Rosengarten family. They had a chemical company in Philadelphia, and they were responsible for large quantities of quinine production. And they eventually built their summer home on the main line outside of Philadelphia, and this was the house they built in 1913. First, it was their summer home, then they moved there, and this was Adolph Rosengarten Jr., who was he was the son of the parents who moved there, but he ended up leaving his estate to become a garden open to the public. We are actually a private garden open to the public, and he left a nice size endowment and set up a board before he passed away in 1990, and it was actually just, I think, a month before I started working at Chanticleer, but after I had been hired. So I never actually met the man. But our first director was Chris Woods. He's an Englishman. He incredible plantsman and designer, and he believed that we were going to make a great garden. So when I first got there, there were 5 gardeners, and you would think it was just any estate. There were boxwood hedges with roses. It was nice architecture, but there was nothing really special. But he believed that we would make a special garden. And because he wanted us to become familiar with the great gardens of the US and the world, he took us on trips. And this was first time I was in California. This is, I think, in LA, maybe at the Botanic Garden. And that was our staff at the time. About 22 years ago, Bill Thomas took over. I knew him because he was at Longwood Gardens as the head of education when I was a student studying horticulture there. And then I was hired at Chanticleer right after I graduated. And Bill Thomas, this is characteristic of him. He's either biking around when we're closed to make the rounds or walking with his corgi, Monty. And he'll stop in and chat with us. And the way Chanticleer works, there are 7 horticulturists, and we're each responsible for a different area of the garden. We are responsible for the design and the maintenance, and the design is basically a discussion with Bill Thomas about, our ideas or his ideas. He also published The Art of Gardening. You may be familiar with this book, but it is published by Timber Press, and he invited the gardeners to contribute. So we've all written pieces, half the book's on plants and half on design. This was put out about 10 years ago, I'm going to say. And this is the full-time staff, which consists of the 7 horticulturists, grounds crew, Eric Sue, our plant recorder, and Lyrian, our head of horticulture. And then we also have a robust part-time staff, and that consists of seasonal part-time horticulturists and usually 5 interns. We like the interns to come for 9 months, so they're usually not in college, they're graduates, and many of them have had other horticulture experiences before they come to Chanticleer. Just some of the areas in the garden. The teacup garden is an area around the house where you enter the garden, and it is mostly bedding. And so you can see in the winter, there's not much there. We have real winters. And in fact, this was a real cold one. And as you've heard, we've had snow for weeks and weeks now, and a lot of 10-degree days and 2-degree nights. So much colder than we've had. The last 3 years before this were very mild. I've overwintered rosemary, and it's been evergreen, which is unusual. We are a climate of 6B/7A, so a lot colder than you, but we can grow a lot of things too. This is Chanticleer House, the house they built in 1913, where the boxwood and roses used to be. And you can see that there are agaves in pots on the rock wall, and this might change from year to year. One thing about Chanticleer that I love, and I think the visitors really appreciate, is how dynamic it is. It doesn't stay the same. The bulb lawn there is, the narcissus and tulips have naturalized or perennialized and come back year after year. The elevated walkway we put in about 10 years ago, and that was to make it more accessible. There's a big hill that goes down there towards the ponds, and I love the way when they built it, it weaves in and out of the trees, and the trees were really protected well so that construction did not disturb them. So you're going from sun into shade and back out again. And there are great views down the hill. From the bottom looking up, this is what you might see. The Serpentine was inspired by a trip I was on with Chris Woods to Italy. I think we were in Umbria when we saw these terraced hillsides with the Italian cypress. And so he kind of wanted to emulate that with this design. There used to be native junipers there that resembled the Italian cypresses. And we change the crops every year. Twice a year, there are different things. Here, there are 2 types of kale, laciniata and red boar. But we've grown artichokes, and we've grown sorghum, sweet corn, flax, sunflowers, many, many different things. I think we're looking into hemp, but there's certain permissions and things. The Asian Woods was a garden that I was in for 11 years before going to the garden I'm in now. And it's basically not a Japanese garden, but a garden of Asian plants as the understory. The large trees are not necessarily Asian. And the furniture you see here is sort of Asian inspired. And I'll get to this in a bit, but we make our own furniture on the property. The pond, when I arrived, was one pond with a weeping willow and a few plantings. Now it's a whole series of ponds with waterfalls and lots of aquatic plants, beautiful stonework. And looking up that hill, we call that the rock ledge. This is also a gravel garden of sorts, but it's not the one I take care of. But at the top of the hill, you see an arbor there. And that, just for reference, is the bottom of my gravel garden. Bell's Run Creek runs through the whole property. The walls were built during the World War II, but we're in the process of removing some of them to make it more less flood prone so that when we have heavy rains, we don't have washout. And this is also along the creek. This fountain and patio were designed by Przemek Walczak, who is the creek gardener and the Bell's Woodland gardener. And he designed the fountain, and then we sent it out to be fabricated. Basically, anything you can dream up and convince our director of, you can do. Uh, in, in fact, this bridge over the creek in Bell's Woodland was Przemek's idea. He sketched it on a napkin. The idea was that, when you hike in the woods and you see a fallen tree that goes over a stream and there's a root flare, this was his idea. So this was fabricated by us over a kind of like, bought-in bridge that we put this on top of. We have a cutting garden and a vegetable garden. The cut flower garden, we cut the flowers for arrangements for the house, for tours, and also for the restrooms. We also do a lot of floating flowers, which are containers filled with water, and then flowers are floated in them. Many of the vases are made by by Chanticleer employees. This is actually the same vase in 3 different arrangements. So our craft started years ago when I think our first winter, we were told to paint the interior of a house. And we gardeners looked at each other and said, this is no good. We got to figure something out. So some of the guys said, well, we can build things. Let's make a wood shop. So they suggested that. And since then, we build most of our furniture and our bridges. And then they put in a metal shop and we build lots of things. So here's Przemek years ago making some fiddle heads that he used in a fence around the water wheel. We've also built tables and chairs and fences. That fence actually is, all the plants in it are from the garden, inspired from the garden. And so the 2 of the guys, Joe and Przemek, learned how to forge. Okay, we're leading up to my area now. We're going through the Sporobolus meadow. This is Sporobolus heterolepis. And there used to be a house here called Minder House. This is where Adolf Jr., the one I showed you the photograph of, lived. His parents built him this house when he got married. And when I arrived, his second wife was living there. He had just passed away. And when she moved out, I think, Chris had been thinking about building a ruin for a long time. And so that's what he did. They wrecked the house and built this ruin in the footprint of the house. And yes, people were aghast that we would tear down a perfectly nice stone house, but we have 2 large houses on the property, and we didn't really need a third. And since Chris was from England, he really wanted a folly. And we'd seen follies in England and in Italy. We went to Nympha. And so this was his dream, and he designed it with landscape architects. Thank you, Jim. And it's based, the rooms are based on the rooms that had been in the house. So the water table is from the dining room table, and actually inspired by a trip we made to Villa Lante in Italy, where there is a water table. The stone, there's a lot of stone sculptures. This is the books in the library, and these were done by an artist local to you. You may all know of Marcia Donahue. So she had been recruited by Chris to do a lot of work at Chanticleer at the time. And here she is when the ruin was built. So at the time of the ruin, so there's the Minder house, there were these little terraced gardens, and the idea was to turn this into a gravel garden. Now, I was in the Asian woods at the time, so I wasn't real involved because another gardener was there, Laurel Varan. But basically, this is me. At some point, I did garden these little gardens, but I wasn't involved in the creating of the gravel garden. So here I am as a budding horticulturist years ago. And from the same vantage point, you will see what happened. We turned it into a ruin and a gravel garden. The gravel garden's idea was that we're facing south, it's gently sloping, and if we make better drainage, we could grow more Mediterranean plants like you guys can. So, because we do not have a Mediterranean climate. In fact, we're quite hot and humid in the summer, very cold in the winter, and we get rain in the summer, which is not Mediterranean. But we dug about 6 inches of gravel into the soil, and I don't know if you're familiar with gravel gardens. There's basically two kinds. There's one kind where you put about 6 to 8 inches of just straight gravel down. And the idea here is that you bare root your plugs and you plant them with the roots touching the soil. That type is great for a municipality planting because when seeds land in the gravel, they don't germinate. And so the maintenance is very, very easy. Nothing grows in there, right? No weeds. But here, everything seeds in. Sorry, let me go back. So the gravel garden is a garden of native and non-native plants. It's a mix of plants that really want to be there and a mix of plants that maybe aren't as enthusiastic. But the first year I took over, I just observed it. I think I knew that it was a very good garden. It had a lot of strengths, but I wanted to see what I could do, where the weaknesses are and what I could do to improve it. And one thing I noticed was that there wasn't enough contrast. And you're probably familiar with this in your own garden. When everything's blooming, it's great. But when things are kind of on the quiet side, that's when you start to notice maybe that there's some lack of contrast, of texture, form, foliage, color, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the challenges was the self-sowing. And this happens in all our gardens, but in a gravel garden, even more so, because if you've ever done any propagation, you know that you put some grit on top and everything, the seeds like to germinate in that grit. So this is Echinacea tennesseeensis. It's native or endemic to a few counties in Tennessee and endangered there. But it is not endangered in my gravel garden. And these are some of the perennials that sow in very voraciously. Calaroe and volucrata kind of looks like a geranium. I don't know if you guys grow it. It scrambles, and then asters love to seed in as well. I particularly like radon's favorite. Some other ones that seed in, Parthenium integrifolium is commonly called false quinine. And Chris Woods originally introduced that plant at Chanticleer. It's a prairie plant, but he liked the connection to our quinine production that founded the garden. The reason many of these plants are so happy in this garden is because they have bulbous or tap roots that store moisture. And that's how they can get through when we have these droughts in the summer. I also grow a number of annuals, including Orlea grandiflora, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. That looks a little bit like Queen Anne's lace, but it's shorter and it's an annual. Blooms in like early June. So here it is, having seeded its way all over this one bed. It's beautiful in that it kind of is a great filler for perennials to emerge out of. In the foreground is Centaurea macrocephala. And there's also some Aramuris, which unfortunately doesn't rebloom well for me because it's not dry enough. But the one problem with this Orlea is that, it can become too much of it, right? So you can either keep a close eye on it and pull it all out when it's starting to go to seed, which is often when it's finishing blooming, or you can, dig out seedlings in the spring before it blooms. But when I rip it all out before it goes to seed, that actually isn't a bad thing because then I can top dress with some more gravel and I have a little space around some of the plants. And negative space is often nice. Sometimes things are just too crowded and you can just sort of see better when you have some negative space. This is Austin Eichid. He was an intern probably about 9 years ago. He's gone on to do great things. He designs for the Chicago Public Parks Millennial Park, and he also works with Pete Odoff on helping him install gardens. But he is editing out larkspur in this picture with our trusty knife with a recessed handle, one of my favorite tools for weeding, for planting plugs. It's like a hori-hori, but that recessed handle, sometimes people say, helps your hand not get, sore. A.M. Leonard is the person or the company we buy it from. And here's the larkspur after it was edited. So just a little more control over where it will grow. I think about this kind of gardening as gardening by subtraction. I do plant a lot plants, but I also do a lot of editing. Nacella behind the larkspur, that Mexican feathergrass, which I think you don't, it's too aggressive for you, or is that right? Yeah, don't grow that. But for us, it's okay. And then behind that is Calamagrostis Carl Forrester and a Yucca rostrata. I think a lot about the seed heads. So, whether to leave them or not depends on many things. So if the Echinacea tennesseensis, it's a nice seed head, and yes, the goldfinches love it. But if I left all of them, I'd be editing them out, all the, just all the time. So I have to edit out all the ones, or many of them, and then leave some of the bigger ones that look good, because it's nice in the fall to have some seed heads. On the other hand, with the Asclepias tuberosa, I think some of the names are cut off at the top. I don't know why that is, but at the top left is Asclepias tuberosa, butterfly weed. That doesn't seed in so much, so I leave those seed heads because they're attractive. And the only reason to deadhead it might be to try to encourage a second bloom, but because it's a bit of a dry garden, that isn't as likely to happen. So just knowing your plant and knowing how to handle the seed heads, I think, is a really important thing, and it can help you with a lot of weeding in the future. The top right is Eryngium giganteum, Miss Wilmot's ghost. And you know who Miss Wilmot was? She used to go around to people's gardens in England and dribble little seeds secretly in their gardens. And, I was elated when this plant decided to seed in to the gravel garden, but it is a bit of a thug. So now I am being very strict in my deadheading. I just wanted to just show you some of the grasses that I grow. I think the stalwarts are the Calamagrostis, Carl Forrester, and the Nacella. But I also love our native Schizocarium scoparium, or little blue stem. You'll see that all along the highways in our area. It has a kind of greenish or bluish green color with hints of red in the summer, and then it gets this gorgeous, I don't know what color is that, russet color in the fall. Needs a lean soil. So I haven't mentioned that I do not add compost to the gravel garden. I don't fertilize. Most of these plants want a lean soil, no rich soil. Uh, the top left is the Calamagrostis brachytricha, which is Korean feathergrass, and it has big plumes of flowers in the fall with the asters. It is a little wheat seedy, but I like it, and it's not too hard to dig out the seedlings. And then Muhlenbergia reverchonii undaunted. Undaunted was selected by Lauren Springer, amazing horticulturist, garden writer, designer in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I love this one. It's a little bit like pink muhly grass, but it blooms earlier and it's not quite as strong a color, maybe a little redder, not as purple. And then Melinus nerviglumis, that must grow for you, right? It's ruby grass. It's a South African native. I think it's perennial there. For us, it's an annual, but it blooms in the like sort of early fall. If you grow grasses, it's nice to situate them where you can see them with backlighting. This is, I photograph Chanticleer weekly, every week, for our website, our social media, and for our PR. And I love backlighting, and this is evening light. So they're just very dramatic in backlighting. The bulbs in the gravel garden start even before we open to the public. We usually open early April or late March. We're closed in the winter, although we have a few sneak peek open days. And I grow a number of Iris reticulatas and Iris hystroides, these bulbous iris that like very good drainage, full sun. And then comes some of the early tulips. I don't know if you can grow tulips? You have no problem with tulips, right? So these are species tulips, which are smaller. And, you know, most of the tulips we grow were developed by the cut flower industry for strong stems and big flowers, but not for perennializing. Maybe they perennialize better for you, but they're really adapted to, you know, the Middle East, and maybe they like your dry summers, and so you have no problem. But for us, we do, and the wild tulips or the species tulips are more perennial. And this is very perennial unless some rodents get it. And I love it has multiple flowers to one stem. They're like star shaped, and they have the most beautiful buds. Another favorite, which I can't find anymore, they're not carrying it, is Tulip Tallii. And this one blooms a little bit later. The last one blooms maybe late. The one I just showed you, Turkistanica, is kind of late March, early April. This is more like mid to late April. Very deep orange color with kind of purpley green outsides to the petals. And on this right, you see it with a rock garden plant, Arenia saxatilis compacta. I like to color coordinate my bulbs. I think it's nice to have kind of like similar colors running through it, but different concentrations of things. Here you have a euphorbia in that deep, deep yellow that was called Euphorbia polychroma until it maybe changed its name, with Narcissus howera and Tulip vadinskii. It's a big red flower held low to the foliage. And then lots of Muscari, Valerie finis, the pale blue. And then the fading tulip is Orange Emperor. So I like oranges and blues, complementary colors. One of my favorite alliums is Zebdinense, which also is hard to find now. I don't know what it is about these bulb vendors, but they just seem to eliminate more and more bulbs. But this one is on very thin stems, so just the slightest breeze will send them all trembling. And I paired that with a white blooming narcissus called Dallas. Oops, I missed one. Allium carataviense. Many allium will bloom and then their foliage just goes south. And you'll see that you have these beautiful purple flowers with kind of yellowing leaves. But carataviense seems to look good altogether. And the leaves are pleated and glaucous, the flower kind of a pale purple. And that's with Cramby maritima or sea kale. The orange, we're going to see that in a little bit, but that is a glaucium hybrid or horned poppy. I grow a range of gladiolas, and I love that the flower shapes are so different from each other. And they start blooming early with the Communis byzantinus cruentis. That one, I think, is in early June, and also the top right is Italicus, also early June, and then Gladiolus Boone is in July, and then Papilio and Ruby, which Ruby is a hybrid of Papilio. Those are, I think, late July or early August. So I grow a matrix of perennials that, just seed in and really want to be there and would take over if I'd let them, but I don't let them. And in the holes where I've edited, I put some other things, including this Dracocephalum, which is a mint family plant. It's about a foot tall with really beautiful blue tubular flowers. The face, by the way, is a Marcia Donahue. Other plants I like, the Berkea in the top. I just saw that at Failoli today. That's a South African perennial that it doesn't really spread that much for me, but it sort of dies out here and seeds in there just enough. Very, very prickly. I love prickly. I love the way, the prickly plants look, but Cirsium occidental, your cobweb thistle, is hard for us to grow, but that's a native for you. I don't know if you grow it in your gardens, but I love when it's just opening. So it doesn't like our heat and humidity, but we can get it to bloom sometimes. So sometimes you just like that challenge, right? And then Verbascum Southern Charm is one of those perennial verbascums that if you keep deadheading it, it keeps blooming. And the flower color ranges from pink to apricot, and has those purple stamens. And then I just learned Salvia nutans from a NARGS member, a North American Rock Garden Society person, Elizabeth Zander. And that's a weeping salvia that I really like. The only echium I can grow is Aminum, this one in the upper left, kind of raspberry colored, and it blooms early in May with allium. And the only Agastache I really have good luck with is Rupestris in the upper right. Love the fragrance of them, but this one's very long-lived for me. Ancusa Dropmore Mediterranean plant, so not real long-lived for me. I think it's a little too dry, but great, great blue, and they're so hard to find. And I also love pulsatillas, and this is a white one. I grow a slew of liatris, and they also cover a long time period. I only knew Liatris spicata, this is Florestine Weiss, the white one. I only knew that one before coming to the gravel garden, but there are so many native ones. Pycnostachya and Newlandii, I think, are early August. Spicata was July. Aspera is late August, and then Liatris elegans is a North American, a southern coastal plant that is not real, doesn't really seed in or persist, but it's really a cool plant, especially if you wish you could grow echiums, because you see how it branches so much, people think it is one. I also love these because monarchs nectar on them. They really are drawn to them. And with the butterfly weed for them to lay their, eggs on, and then the liatris for them to nectar on. It's really nice. Just a few of the shrubs that I grow in the gravel garden. This is the most asked about plant because it looks like eucalyptus. People think that's what it is, but it's a Lonicera, a honeysuckle, with peltate leaves that surround the stem. And it kind of has a ghost-like appearance because it's very glaucous. And then these Hippophae rhamnoides sprite, the pointer doesn't work, but those gray mounding shrubs are dwarf sea buckthorns, and they give a very Mediterranean feel to the garden. And I love it when people come through and say, this reminds me of California. The Hippophae are these gray shrubs. Yep, that's it. That's the Hippophae. Never heard of sea buckthorn? It's the only downside is it's rhizominous, so it suckers, and but that's not so bad because sometimes they die. And then I have a new one. Did you want to help me?
Yeah, I can help you with the lace.
Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, it's not in the right place. Oh, you pull it. I was pushing the middle. Okay, thank you. And ribes, I've seen all your beautiful pink ribes, but this is Odoratum crandall. It has a clove-like scent, and then red berries in the summer. The Juniperus virginiana Taylor was to kind of model an Italian cypress that does not get pruned. It's just fastigiate like that. Behind it, you see Juniperus virginiana emerald sentinel, which my predecessor, Laurel Varan, had put in many of those in the gravel garden, and she was pruning them 2 times a year to make them look like these, you know, like Taylor looks, but it was just too much work. So I got the right plant for the right place. And so what I'm after in this garden is to have a lot of contrast of form and texture. And this is a section of the garden where I feel like it's achieved. There's just a few plants, no flowers, but it's still very interesting with the yucca rostratas, the lavender, the nacella, and agave americana, which will come in the winter. But I've also introduced large leaf plants like Salvia argentea with these big felty leaves for contrast. And I just love, they do bloom with white flowers, but I love the white hairs on the leaves, and they're very soft and just how they look. That's the Aster oblongifolius radon's favorite behind it. And sometimes seeds of verbascum come sailing into my garden from the rock ledge, and I'll leave some of them because they have a nice bold foliage as well. And behind it, you see that Malinus nerviglumis, the ruby grass. And there's a Melianthus major, which is not hardy, but I sometimes plant them out because of that texture is so great. Here's Berkea covered in some nice frost. It also has a big, robust texture form. Hardy succulents, the yucca rostrata, and when they're little, I protect them in the winter because they don't mind cold, but they don't like cold and wet. So I put polycarbonate over them. And then now I have these very big ones. And then I have the big ones. I think that they were initially planted soon after the gravel garden. So it's been 26 years, 25 years since the gravel garden started. So I'm guessing they're 23, 24 years old. And then there's an Opuntia. And maybe your Opuntias do this too, but in the winter they lie down and then they come back up again when it gets warm. No, it has to get cold, I guess, really cold. So this is how they look in the winter when they're young and they're getting some protection from moisture. I mean, obviously some things are drifting in. and then they get too big to be protected, and then they're on their own and they seem to be okay. But you know, you're getting that the roots strong enough to live. And I also have, we have a succulent house. We have a few greenhouses, and I bring in these non-hardy succulents and plant up troughs after the spring bulbs, which are mixed with some perennials. I remove those and plant them up with succulents, which are not hardy, but that is just gives some interest in the summer and fall. Some of the succulents get planted directly in the ground, like this agave attenuata. I envy your succulents, boy. um, and as I said before, agave americanas. I have been able to overwinter agave avatifolia 3 winters under polycarbonate, and then I take it away, and I have one that's really big. Well, that mist helps a lot. Oops. And here we are. This is the end of the season, things going back to the greenhouse. Actually, we stopped using the loader. We put corks on the ends of the points, and then you kind of can dig these up without hardly any soil, almost bare rooted. So then we just get I cut back all the lower leaves with a scythe, cuts very well with these into these. And then just like 3 people, 4 people lift it up onto a golf cart. That's how we do it now. But this definitely is more dramatic for a talk. And then the foliage color, the contrast of foliage color, which I saw a lot of in Philoli today, just, pairing silvers with greens. And there's not much blooming here except a little bulbini and some Cecily gymnifrum, but it's really the foliage color that's carrying the interest. And there's a lot of different silver plants there. So I do use photography to help me with my design decisions, and I'll just show you how. So when I took over the gravel garden, it was 13 years ago. It had been a year since a horticulturist had gardened it. It had been taken care of, I'd say maintained by a seasonal assistant, and it was being weeded, but a lot of the plants that were aggressive were taking over. So you can see there's a lot of, here we go, Calaroe all here, and asters all here, and look how small the Eucharistratas were. So that's 13 years ago. And if you take that and take away the color, and you see that, you can start to see that there's not a lot of definition. There's a lot of mounding forms, some vertical forms, some spiky forms, but it needs more contrast. When an area becomes, I'm doing a lot of editing all the time, but when an area becomes too muddled, you sometimes just have to dig the whole thing out and start over. And this is an example where I've done that, not just a small part of it, I probably added more gravel, and then I'm continuing this dianthus across the path. When we plant in the gravel garden, I usually bare root. Sometimes I even swish the roots around in a water to get all the soil out, because I want it to acclimate to the actual soil as soon as possible, and that potting medium is much drier than the gravel garden. Roots are spread out, and then it's planted. And this is what it might look like the next year. So this is more what I'm trying to achieve. More variation, spiky things, columnar things, vertical things, just a whole variety. I'm also always trying to see more gravel. one thing that I think is incredibly important in any garden is to take photographs of not just your successes, but the weak areas, and then think about how to improve them. Take notes, take photographs. And then here's an example. So even before we had cell phones, I used to take my camera when I was shooting the whole garden and then print out a picture of where, where I think I might need to add more allium. We put in our bulb orders very early, so we can be sure we get everything. So in June, we're putting in our bulb orders. So through the spring, I'm looking at all my bulbs and evaluating them, where I might need more, what I want to do. Because otherwise, when you order, hundreds or thousands of bulbs, how would you ever know where to put them? So some of them do. Carataviense does, and at home I have allium. I'm forgetting, but some of them just kind of deplete with time, and you have to bump them up every few years. Um, uh, and the tulips are like, if I have a dry summer, they'll come back really good. And then if I don't, I might, so maybe every few years I just have to evaluate different displays. And then planting, we use well, I don't use it anymore, but for about 34 years, I've used this auger. And now I let younger people do it, but it's really good for tulips and allium for large bulbs. Now I'm going to just tell you a little project story of the renovation of the living carpet. So you see that, well, adjacent to the gravel garden is this clump of furniture, stone furniture built by one of the gardeners, Doug Randolph. And there's a big 3-liter tulip poplar right here that blew down in a summer storm, and suddenly through that area where the furniture was into full sun. So Laurel had gardened it and had done this ground cover. They called it a carpet. It was maybe ajuga and, liriope, ophiopogon, things like that. People walked on it. They mowed it. It didn't really like it. The plants weren't happy. So I was very glad that this happened, even though it was sad the tree died. And sorry I do that. And so this was an opportunity to connect it to the gravel garden and do something more like the gravel garden. So first I decided to put paths in so nobody stepped on my plants. And then we added gravel, and we used an air spade to dig it in, because that's a great way to work under trees without digging into the roots. An air spade is a tool that arborists use often to aerate around trees. So we're mixing, it sort of blows air into the soil. We're mixing the gravel into the soil. And then I picked stone that was similar to some of the stone in the gravel garden. And the first year planted it up. My vision was to have silver plants, a lot of silver plants, and also to have it be not too tall so you could see over it to the rest of the garden. And these were some of the plants I used. That's the Glaucium hybrid that you asked what that orange flower was. It's a horned poppy. I got the seed from Denver Botanic Garden. And what else? I love the Cecily gummiferum, the moon carrot, which foliage looks a little bit like Artemisia Powys Castle. It's a biennial and has an umbel flower. The Glaucium starts blooming in May, reblooms later, but not as vibrant orange. And the first year I used a bunch of annuals just to make it fuller, including your native Leia platygosa. What? Tidy tips. Yeah. From above, you can really see the silver with the green and the different shapes. Yeah, so the stone actually that's around the sofa, Laurel put in, and that those are cobbles, and then I added the other stone. The couch and chairs are clothed in hydrangea vines, and the orange flower is Ursinia solar fire, a South African annual. There's a yucca cernia over here. It's gotten bigger, but that's his stalk. And that's how it looks in May with the glaucium blooming and the Allium carataviense. And then in June with the salvia blooming. And then in December, before the really gets cold and the Artemisia Palace Castle doesn't look like this anymore. Um, how much time do I have left, Jim? 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go really fast. I just have a few more things to tell you because Jim also asked me, 10 minutes. Jim also asked me to show you a little bit about the photography that I do. But anyway, lately I've been getting into, so I'm part of NARGS, North American Rock Garden Society, and I don't have a crevice garden, but I've been getting into splitting rocks to make crevices to try to grow some of these plants. So we're doing that with wedges and feathers, drilling holes and then banging the wedges in. And this is one of the interns helping me. So, so this is what it might look like planted up. That's a globularia over here. And then some succulents and pulsatilla. So, maybe I'll skip through the Gladitsia bed very quickly. Just saying that the roots were on the surface and discussion with Bill Thomas to protect the tree, we put the bed in. And I've been growing a lot of Delosperma. I'm trying to make the beds have lower and lower plants so that, because these low plants don't like competition. So Delosperma with a white flowered Allium carataviense and a lot of asphodelene foliage in the back there. The Taurica might not be quite dry enough for the Taurica, but the Lutea is seeding in like crazy. And here's just a little video going through the bed. And yeah, this bed really excited me because I just think it's kind of weird looking, especially that hot pink and orange of the Delosperma. And then these California poppies decided to seed in too. And then I also have an Clematis integrifolia, which is a herbaceous clematis. And the way it looks with this Aquilegia chrysantha, they really go great together. Just something about they're talking to each other. And then it finishes up with Bigeloia nutellii, which is a little grassy-like plant with these kind of yellow umbels. So photography, I shoot, as I said, in backlighting, either in the early morning or the evening. And I don't shoot if the light is bad. I hate going to gardens in full sun in the middle of the day. it's a real problem, but I love to try to capture all the work of my coworkers in the best light. So midday sun just washes everything out of things. It just bleaches everything. Overcast light is much more forgiving, and there are different types of overcast light. So it can be very gloomy and dark, but it can be bright, and that's what I look for, bright overcast light. And then, of course, evening or morning light, you have that backlighting that just illuminates everything so beautifully. I feel like you can photograph an ugly thing in beautiful light and make it beautiful. These are colchicum. And this is some backlighting with mist. Not as often as you do, I don't think. Um, we get it sometimes. I feel like you get it a lot. But I'm very excited when we get it. Sometimes the humidity's almost like a mist. This is more front lighting, but it's low front lighting, which is much softer and golden. And then this is the same scene with front lighting ah, and backlighting. So front lighting, backlighting. So different. It's really interesting. When I photograph in the morning, I'm photographing in one direction of the garden, and when I'm doing it in the evening, it's the opposite. So fog is another thing I love, and we don't have it enough, but it can be really, really exciting. Also, another thing I think about is framing a view. So you can frame it with many things, but you see how I've focused on the distance and the foreground I've left blurry. I'm using the leaves of a maple tree to frame a view. And what that does is it makes you feel like I want to enter that and go into that space. So you can use a window or a door frame to frame a view. In the ruin, I have a lot of those views. And also I use a camera, a Canon camera, so I use it on manual. I can control the f-stop. And when I photograph close up, I like to often have a very shallow f-stop. Of course, you can do that on phones nowadays, but you don't, and actually I think you have more control now. But, so here I focused on the the red dahlia, because I think about where's the person's eye going to go when they look at this picture. That's what needs to be in focus. It's a very funny little, having trouble with it. In this picture, you see how there's a tree branches in the background. If I'd had a big range of focus, that would have interrupted these pods. They would have, you know, competed for attention. So that's why I did this very shallow depth of field. And just ending with a picture taken recently in the gravel garden of Clematis tibetana, seed head. And the last picture of the gravel garden in the winter. So thank you very much.